Welcome back to episode 47 of the Weekly Boost podcast. Just Ben and I this week again, coming back after a pretty good conversation on episode 46, microbial world, pretty interesting stuff. Kind of was able to get into what I like to do. But this week, we're going to start off with something that I think you came up with the idea, Ben. It was something along the lines of we're going to talk about some intuition and, what that does to us. But I want to get started by just saying, what made you think of this?
Yeah. Well, first off, like on top of microbial things, it looks like you like to fish there. You're on a boat
Yeah, a
still,
little
and
bit. Yeah, I'm on a boat.
your hat.
Yeah,
No,
that's for sure.
I thought of this. This is an idea. I mean, I've seen stuff about it going around, and it's really interesting to think that you have this like central conscience that like tells you like this like inner voice, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
when it comes to like making decisions too, it's like a weird thing that I've experienced, and I don't know if it's like real or if it's just like my, if it is my gut telling me to do something or just like
Mhm.
my logical reasoning taking over. But intuition for me is something that's, it's interesting to talk about because there's certain things that especially in like big decision making, right? Like moving or, a new job or even like entering a relationship, let's say.
Mhm.
It's just like life altering thing a lot of times, and
Yeah.
it's like in your gut sometimes you do it and you just are worried
Yeah.
about like the backlash from the people around you in your
Yeah.
circle, or like I don't know, it's just an interesting topic. And I think judging from our previous episodes and things, I think we'd you know crank out a good conversation here with it. So
Yeah. No, I for sure see what you're talking about, and I can kind of concur with some of the events in my life and sitting down and thinking that analyzing something and trying to figure out, the best way to do something isn't necessarily the right move. And intuition kind of builds upon that. The idea that, that trust in your gut and kind of just going with it, right? Like if it just
yeah,
feels right, just do it, kind of an idea. And before this episode, I did a little bit of digging and kind of looked at the science behind intuition as well as some, oppositions to intuition. And we'll get into those in a little bit, but just kind of defining intuition because you hear it all the time. Just kind of have a clear, concise definition. And it's
yeah,
essentially the ability to make successful or unsuccessful decisions without conscious analytical processing. And so when you think of the words conscious analytical processing, for me, that means sitting down, not literally, but just figuratively sitting down and weighing out, the parts of the decision-making process, like a cost benefit analysis kind of a deal with any
sure,
decision that you're trying to make. And so we do that all the time, right? We sit down and what are we going to allocate money to this month, right? Instead of, we're going to have to pay rent, we're going to have to pay, utilities. What extra money are we going to have? Like those kinds of conversations and those kinds of, topics of, the decision-making process are very analytical and conscious.
yeah,
What intuition kind of toes the line is, are you able to make a decision that generates success or can, provide failure without diving deep into that conscious thought and consciously sitting down and analyzing something? And
yeah,
it was really hard for me to think of examples in my life that I did this because, yeah, there were probably some things that I just said, to heck with it. I'm just going to go do it regardless of the outcome. And I don't know if that's more of intuition or more of just optimism, I guess. They can kind of,
yeah,
coincide in some of the things that I'm thinking of. But yeah, I just wonder, this is a question I thought of when I was researching this, is just what kind of historical events were made based off intuition? Like you think about these things and you're like, well, hey, wait a minute, we're all human. We sit down and we can weigh things out and measure them in our heads, but we also can just think on the fly or for,
yeah,
lack of thinking on the fly and kind of just have things happen for us. And so it's like, hey, what happened? What does history tell us about this stuff? And it was really hard to find because, again, it's stuff that not too many things are written down about it because it wasn't a planned out thing. It just, you kind of instinctively went with it. So
yeah,
I don't know. I kind of, went down the rabbit hole of, the clicking and looking at
yeah.
web pages and stuff. So
It's it's interesting, like you bring up like historical things, and I feel like when you learn about it too, it's like you think it's this like long drawn out,
yeah.
like let's for example, like breaking off from the United Kingdom into turning, or
Yeah.
becoming independent. Like something like that, like who knows how, deliberate. I mean something like that, I feel like with like constitutional conventions, things like that. But like it is a really interesting way, because I like phrase it in the beginning of this, like it's like your inner conscience like telling you what's right and what's wrong. But this is like the definition, at least, is saying you aren't doing that like analytical. It's just like your gut feeling, and it's just like, okay, I'm gonna go do this, or like I feel like I need to do this.
Yeah, that's the exact way to go about it. Is like I feel, I have a feeling, and probably one of the most famous quotes that sort of revolves around intuition is from the Star Wars, saga, Han Solo, where he sits down and says, "I've got a bad feeling about this." That's literally just intuition at its finest, and it's made the silver screen and major motion picture and stuff like that. But it's kind of the idea of what we're trying to talk about is, is it always good? Is intuition always good? Like, you think that if you can trust your gut, and the cliche saying, trust your gut. Well, sometimes your quote unquote gut can be wrong. And so that's another avenue for discussion in this episode.
Do you think intuition is judged by like success? Like the way, I mean, just looking at the definition, it's like the ability to make successful decisions. Like if you have bad intuition, like, is that
success is relative.
That's true.
To the situation.
That's fair.
So depending on which side of the coin you're looking at, success for one person could be failure for another. If it was like a business decision, which I talk about in a Harvard Business Review paper later on, just talking about how those decisions are almost every other time made intuitively, and that's hard to comprehend when it's something that has to do with money, right? Or managing people. But there's other instances that I think get a little fuzzy with intuition and how if you can use it.
So you said you can't really think of a time that
I sat down and I tried to think of it twice. I couldn't. Really? I try to be a very analytical person just because of like the field of work that I get into. Some things, I guess, like maybe when I picked a certain strain of bacteria for my research, maybe that was just, I like this one, I'll do this one. And with no prior research knowledge, going into it flying blind, kind of picking that. That's as closest to a decision, that I made without any analytical thought. Like, I'm sure there was some there, but that's as close as I can think of in the recent history.
Like, I don't know if it's necessarily intuition, but I can think of, a handful of things for me at least that it was like let's say for going to Ripon, right? Like no prior affiliation with the place. I only knew like one person that went there, and he helped me tour. I remember talking to him on the way home from work as a dishwasher on my senior year of high school in the summer, and I'm already like slated to go to Marquette. I have a room, I have a roommate, I have my deposits in. I went and started to buy, look at books to get an idea. And it was just like within the course of a week, everything just like changed. And now that I'm thinking of it, I feel like in the moment, right? Like you're trying to weigh out the different things. But I knew like I had been in a position where it's like, I want to play baseball. Like, so for me, that was like the deciding like gut feeling. And may who knows, like we can't, go back to 18-year-old Ben and say, okay, well, if you would have done this at Marquette, you would have been doing this, this, and this, like, I don't understand. And I think you kind of psych yourself out and stress yourself out by thinking like that, like those what if situations. But it's like this weird thing where you feel like you have to do it. Like if you don't, you're going to be regretting it. And it's going to open door A, D, and X down the road, but all the other ones are going to be closed, and you just got to find your way to the next door because this is the path that you chose. And that's a really deep way of thinking about life.
But it's a good way to think about it, because it does. You're presented with opportunities regardless of your decision. And I think intuition, it's a really big highlight of it, because you're going off of an opportunity almost like at face value, right? You're looking at it, the dead of the eyes, like you're just staring at it. Okay, I'm gonna go forward with this without even thinking about what are the the ramifications of your decision until you get there. And then that's what the whole kind of inflection is. Is that what that is? Like reflection, but you kind of I don't know, whatever.
You're good.
But for me, it was just really hard to generate some sort of example for you to for myself to share about like intuition, because I just feel like some way or another, a lot of my decisions are made with some analytical thought. And it, like I said, like
Yeah.
maybe trying a different food for the first time is some sort of intuition, I guess. Like, hey, maybe this will be good, and I'll try it. Like, I don't really know how to judge my thoughts without analytical processes. But one of the things that I really enjoyed about looking this up was that there's science behind it. And I thought that was interesting, because there we are again, jumping on the train of the science and like
real,
loving
dude.
that stuff. No, it's not.
Real.
It's not. But one of the things that I found, it was on
Sorry.
It was on
Continue.
psychologicalscience.org. And so I looked and checked the credibility of this, and they publish a lot of science-based psychological articles.
Wait. You checked like the credibility of it?
Yeah, I looked at some
like you just didn't like look at it and just
it took me a little bit.
Oh.
That's why the next article is from a long time ago, because everything now is based off of like a newspaper's website.
So like interesting. Like I'll take notes of that. That's a good.
It's a really good. It's a really good study habit, if I'm being honest.
Okay. Continue. Sorry.
Yeah, and so this study that I'm talking about, it was trying to quantify intuition, or the sensation, right? Like if we can actually, if it's a real thing that people can physically manifest as a sense. And turns out it is. And you're going to be like, well, how do you quantify something that's relative to the person and relative to situations that are infinite in difference? Like, how do you do that? Well, a group of investigators subjected college students to a series of emotional images using continuous flash suppression, and what this did, flash suppression in itself is just really rapid flashing of images, and it was blocked off to only one eye. And so what this meant is that one eye is seeing these images, but the person doesn't even know that they're seeing them, because flash suppression is so rapid that it just looks like it's just white light just shine in your eyeball, but it's actually, you're subconsciously seeing these images. And that's important, because
you can't process it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So
like you can't think in your subconscious, essentially.
Yes. And so that's essential to the definition that we were talking about of intuition before, is that it's subconscious thought, or subconscious, not lack of thought, really. But so these images are being presented in one eye, and the other eye is forced to determine the direction of these like white TV noise dots. It's really weird. So like you turn the static or the TV on, and it's just like that really white noise, or like in the horror movies, at like 3 a.m. in like the haunted motel, the TV just turns on and it's white noise, that kind of thing. But the funny thing is, these images that the individuals are seeing, there's positive and negative images, and those two categories determine the direction of the dots. So there's a control. So positives go one way, negatives go the other. And so remember, these subjects can't see the images, but to the study's glory, individuals correctly guessed almost all of the directions of the dots based off the images that they saw with one eye.
Interesting.
So they subconsciously processed and used that information to make, I guess, an educated guess is like the layman's terms, but in reality, it was using their intuition at a quantifiable level to decipher which way the dots were going. And so the experiment was repeated 4 different times, and almost the exact same results showed. So individuals were able to unconsciously make positive decisions in determining, for this case, the direction of dots, and be right about it, because they were some way, some form, some neural connections were saying, hey, we think this is the right way to go because of stuff that we have no conscious ability to analyze. You were just seeing this stuff unconsciously. So kind of cool.
So do you think intuition is something that's it's like moldable and expandable, like based on your prior experience? Right.
Well, I think so.
So I do too. Like I think your gut feeling changes as you as you mature, as you like experience more and more in life.
Yeah.
But doesn't that like negate the idea of like conscious reasoning? Because if you are using your past experiences as a navigator for your intuition, like doesn't that contradict?
Yeah,
Like you know what I'm saying?
exactly.
Like it's this
That makes
weird
a
thing.
valid point, because again, you're using information that has consciously happened to you to, suppose something is intuitive, right? Like you're thinking of past experiences that have happened. You've been able to analyze the outcomes, and you're like, hey, I trusted my gut that one time. Let's not trust it again. Is that like counter intuition? Is that like anti-intuition? I don't know. That's kind of a weird. It's a mental pretzel. It's a conundrum for sure.
That word is just.
I love that word. It's a buzzword for me. But
yeah, it's like this.
I wonder why. I wonder
this this pre-conscious activity is intuition, but if you are like adding to your intuition, you're being analytical about your thought processes. If you don't just like see left or right and you think, okay, well, I'm going to pick left because of this, and the past 10 times I picked left, it was, wrong.
Now I think that's like looking at like probability too. I think that's getting into more like a statistical analysis. And so again, you're thinking about it in a different way. But I think that just the beauty of this experiment is that these images were unconsciously presented to people, and they were using, their brains were using this information to make a decision that, translates to intuition. And I think that's pretty neat. It also
pretty neat.
I think another part of the article said that like a smaller finding of it was that like there was some sort of actual physical manifestation, like hair raised on their arms or some weird thing that like indicated that it was occurring, I guess. And it was kind of a cool way to look at it. But I don't know how credible that part of the research is, if that was repeatable across all four
additional evidence for intuition came from participants' physiological data. In one experiment, the researchers measured skin. Okay.
Something, it was something with the skin company.
In an exciting finding, the researchers observed that skin conductance predicted behavioral intuition. That is, even when people weren't aware of the images, their bodies showed a physiological reaction to the emotional content of the stimuli.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so
does that get back to like fight or flight? Like a
little bit, I think a little bit.
Like a
because these images are granted
visceral
they're positive and negative.
To something.
Like a positive image is like a puppy, and then a negative image is like a cobra about to strike. Like these kinds of things elicit an emotional response too. Sure. But again, you can't consciously know that these are eliciting this response, because that's how they're being, fed to you via this. I think it's called like a stereoscope, a mirror stereoscope is what they use. I'm almost positive they mask the image of one eye.
That in here.
So it probably looks like a little bit like a monocle with like a divider, so you can't see out of one eye. Or like when you go to the eye doctor and they tell you to like cover, and you're like 1 or 2.
Oh.
3 or 4. It kind of, I feel like it'd be like that, but a little bit different.
Hold on, I'm gonna try something new.
Uh-oh, guys, we're we're doing it.
Yeah.
And this is where the episode just crashes.
we're doing it. We're doing it. Okay.
Oh no.
Can you see
it? I can. So that's a stereoscope. There we
go. Advancing WBP. Okay. So that's a stereoscope. So is it? So you're just kind of seeing one, and it's interesting.
Yeah. So I think.
Like, so this image is going here.
Yeah.
Okay.
And and so both eyes can't see the same image, is what I'm getting at, or they're doing something. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So that's kind of cool. Look at that, a little physics, a little refraction, reflection
look
type deal.
Here's my screen, dude. Isn't it?
Yeah, I know. That's nuts.
We're gonna stop that share.
All right, we're back.
We're back.
We're back.
No, this is something that's like.
I think it's a little over my head.
It is. It really is.
I'm not a cognitive psychologist by any means.
When I was with Patty, maybe it was your freshman year. I remember him, or it was after maybe, and I was coaching with him. But there was like this podcast, and it's like, about consciousness, and like that's just man, like thinking about if something is conscious or not, and that'll put me in a mental pretzel like super quick.
Yeah, I could go get my general psychology textbook and like go over the stuff again, but it's just stuff that I kind of just take for granted. And I mean, I'd love to get into
You
it more,
do,
but
yeah.
like that's why talking about it like this, it's so, I guess, just satisfying because you bring out parts of like your own ideology that you don't even think about. Because if I sat down and just said, before actually let's go back,
Mhm.
talking about intuition, I would have never brought up a conversation about it unless you said something, just because I would have went with like, hey, I may or may not have it. I feel like I misuse the word intuitive now, knowing what the real definition of it is. Like,
Yeah.
I think of something intuitive as like really easy, but that might be another like a synonym definition. But looking at what I've noticed for, you know, numerous resources saying what intuition is, like, hey, wait a minute, like
It's
I guess it could mean easy, but at the same time it's like,
instinctive.
yeah, like
Instinctive is there, or
there's got to
innate.
be some sort of like unconscious thought. So I guess unconscious
Yeah.
thought, some people, make a suggestion for it to be easy, but
Mhm.
it's kind of, it's a fun little topic. And of course, like everything, you may be all for intuition, you may be gung-ho about it and love it, but there's opposition to it, like everything, right? There's
Yeah.
always two sides, or at least two sides to something.
Mhm.
And what I mentioned before about, you know, managerial decisions and individuals in executive power, and I'm not talking about the branch of government, I'm talking about, you know, administrative execs and stuff like that.
Yeah, don't get into that, dude.
Yeah. So this is a little dated of an article, but it seemed like a reliable source. When you hear the word Harvard Business Review, or the words Harvard Business Review, you're kind of like, hey, that sounds a little bit all right. I don't know. I know their name oversteps into a lot of stuff, but I saw a statistic in there that's saying that I'm just going to use the statistic, 45% of managerial decision making, like managerial decisions, are intuitive based. And
That's
I just
scary.
I just like I just don't know
That's
how I feel with that,
scary.
because if we're gonna go with that trusty gut feeling and
Yeah.
45% of your decisions, you must have a pretty successful, gut feeling if you're like
Yeah.
able to stick with that. And you're making decisions now. Granted, if you're at the tippy top, you're the big CEO, and you're making an intuitive decision of like, hey, let's cut the budget by 33% without even going into it, like, right, like, what
Yeah,
are we
just
cutting,
just
like,
cut it, man.
how do you, there's no evidence to justify that claim, that like, hey,
Evidence. Sorry.
evidence, sorry. Sorry, I'm getting all
No,
flustered. But
that's
like, how does that decision, like, I don't know how you justify that.
well, and I'm looking at this like the argument of this article, right, is like it's a slippery slope to just trust your
Yeah,
gut the whole time.
yeah.
Um, but like,
I guess
is it blind though? Like, if you think about how long the process might have been, depending on
yeah,
your background, to get to a place where you're an executive in a
yeah,
corporation, or even let's say you're in administration in a university, right?
yeah,
You a lot of times you have to like get chosen. You have to have your proven background,
yeah,
and I think a lot of it relies on this, like this quick think about the amount of time that you like save from
yeah.
okay, well, let's really run the numbers here, instead of just saying, okay, well, we're gonna but it is a dangerous thing. Like,
It is,
if you
because
overly rely on something that what do they call it, mystical, they call, yeah,
yeah, something
the
funny.
trust and intuition is understandable. People have always sought to put their faith in mystical forces when confronted with earthly confusion.
Hey,
That's
that, you know what,
that's a powerful
baseball play.
sentence.
You know what? I love that, because we deal with baseball superstition, kind of as a
Yeah.
mystical power that affects our earthly lives. Like stepping on the line automatically lets us give up 4 nukes, or like stuff like that. So I can sort of see how we try to make sense of the world using some sort of not supernatural, but not mystical, but some sort of just
Yeah.
explanation for it in this way. And I think I mean, I can see why it's an attractive idea, because you want to be able to trust yourself and think that, hey, I'm able to make this decision without having to think too much about it. What can go wrong, because I'm here? Like, I've already made it this far. I've had so much experience. Let's just go for it. And I feel like that's dangerous, but at the same time, it's like our hubris showing again, right? Like it's that idea. It's like, hey, we're pretty good at what we do. Let's just run with it and see what happens. Like that's dangerous to me. But
My
at the
word's
same time,
painstaking, or is that what it was? Painstaking is my word.
yeah,
Yours is
yeah,
hubris.
yeah.
Uh,
And then mental pretzel is
yeah,
the pod term.
yeah. Thanks. Okay, so quote: detached from rigorous analysis, intuition is a fickle and undependable guide. It is as likely to lead to disaster as to success. End quote.
Yeah. And so this is
It's
great because
true.
yeah, it is. It's great because we have this like quantifiable like scientific study that sits down and says, hey, this is a real thing, and it makes sense that people can use this as a
Mhm.
tool for
When was it?
decision making.
When was this first one published?
The
The first one we're
the
talking about?
science article was pretty recent. I know it
16?
was yeah, I
Yeah,
think it was
16.
within 5 years.
Okay, this one's from 2003.
Three, yeah. So
Okay.
that's why I said it was a little dated, but I feel like that's the it's hard for like the date to like really make it go bad, I guess. Like I'm gonna talk about like staleness or like expiration dates. Like how, you know, I'd probably be, you know, likely to agree that the number probably went up with intuitive decision making.
But I mean,
You
this
know,
article is just dragging intuition through the mud.
it is,
Like
but you
intuition
have to have
precedent,
both sides.
even more insidious problem. It masks Me Too thinking. We like to assume that our intuition is uniquely our own, a distillation of our particular experiences and insights. But
Yeah.
while that may have been true a century ago, when people led very different lives depending on where they lived and what they did, it's no longer the case. It's just like,
So yeah, we have two sides really. We have
yeah,
scientific promotion of intuition as a logical way to analyze or unconsciously process stuff, and then you got business aspect of it. I'm not saying that they're
this
two
is,
different sides of the coin, but business and science, they go together sometimes, but you see a division there. Obviously, you
you
see a
know,
division with the
I mean, this is a really long like article.
yeah, it's long,
Um,
but
after kind of reading this and I'm thinking like intuition, it's like baseball with the eye test, right?
yeah,
Like if you're gonna run the numbers here and you
yeah,
you does he get on base? You keep going through and rely heavily on that, but you get to a point where it's like, okay, well, do they pass the eye test? And I think that's part. I think that's a good comparison. Right, it's
mhm,
partly like intuition. I don't know how I feel about it. Like I think that there is like intuitive thoughts,
yeah.
but again, is it uniquely your own? Like, is it the universe telling you like, hey, you should take that door, or you should
Yeah.
pack up and move to Oklahoma,
I know
and
it's hard. It's hard to think about because I guess this is the fun part is when you think about it, you're analyzing it. So is it actually Is like was it an intuitive decision? And so you don't know. I think in like its purest form, you have to literally just. It's like I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Back to the Future,
Yeah, a
where
while
Doc
ago.
Brown falls on the toilet and then the image of the flux capacitor just pops up in his head. I feel like that is
Mm,
again like an example of it, like where there was no, it's just like boom, an event that happened that sort of the universe kind of brought upon. Again, a supernatural, a mystical
yeah,
sort of source of this guidance, and then you have an idea and you run with it without thinking about the logistics. You think of the logistics after. I feel like that's the kind of mindset that intuition kind of brings forward is we'll think about it after. We'll
yeah.
understand the choice after we make it. I feel like that's a pretty good, take it and run kind of rough definition of it. It's like we'll just do it and we'll see what happens after. I'm sticking with that. That's my best. That's my best.
Yeah, man, why did we do this to ourselves?
I don't know. We
I'm gonna be thinking
really,
about this all night.
yeah. But like
Interesting.
it's a good conversation because again, I'd take it for granted. I wouldn't have thought about it. But like,
It's a slippery word. It says its
yeah,
definition can be
that's
stretched to mean almost anything, which is true. Like it's
yeah,
like, oh, it was my intuition speaking, not like the three businesses in your like field
yeah,
that failed before by not
yeah.
doing X, Y, and Z. But now,
But then like how do we use it as I guess in court. This is a good example of it. Using it as like a defense or prosecution kind of, angle, right?
Yeah, I don't
Like,
think that
oh,
holds.
it was my intuition that I, made this decision and, did this. Well, how do you how do
Or it was
you
your intuition
provide
that something
evidence
was
for that?
up and you just
Yeah,
yeah.
you hear that in a lot of like alibi or like in a lot of,
Yeah, I just knew something was amiss, so I went to check
yeah,
it out, like
yeah,
with like witness accounts, let's say.
yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
Or it's because, or it wasn't the fact that the garbage can wasn't out on the driveway 3 weeks in a row.
Yeah.
Like kind of a thing. Like maybe
Where
I'll check it
where
out.
but there too. Like here's a good example, right? Like there, let's say there was a break
An
in,
accident, yeah, a break
right?
in, something like that.
And it, like you said, like the garbage wasn't taken in and it was still out, let's say.
Yeah,
And something was different, but you don't necessarily think about that, but it's your brain. This okay, it's like
it's
your
hard.
brain thinking that okay, something's amiss, like it's not the same, right? Like
Yes.
like if you drive to work every day, right, at the same time, and next thing you know, something's different.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't necessarily know what that different thing is. You just know it's different.
Something's up, right? There's a break in the
Is that your
routine.
intuition because it is subconscious? Like if
That's
you think
probably,
something's up, and then you go through and be like, okay, well,
but
like in that case, you think something's up, and then you're like, okay, well, what is it? And then you see the trash can, you're like, hey, that's not back yet. And then you go and you see like a broken window or something, and
well,
it's
isn't thinking about it not intuition though?
that's what I'm saying. Like your
Yeah,
intuition is your brain telling you something's wrong, let's say,
yeah.
and then
But then you
your
immediately
brain,
analyze it.
you switch to like a conscious
Yeah,
analysis of it, and then
yeah,
you're like, oh, it's that,
yeah.
and then you go
It's a
walk
hard
up
one
to
to
the,
talk about.
I think I think I agree with this where it's a slippery word. It can be
It
used for a
is.
variety of things and used for however you want to see
Yeah,
fit. Like you can say that it's intuition with this experiment that was run,
yeah.
or you could just say it's a building, a compounding, not system, like a bank of knowledge of previous things that you know
Yeah,
didn't work or is dangerous or whatever.
yeah.
I
Because
think
like,
that
how can you sift? Yeah, exactly. How can you sift through the prior
yeah.
experience and the new, and not use the prior experiences to judge a new situation? Like, I just don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how you do that and sit down and say that's intuition. I feel like that's just learning
Isn't it?
from your mistakes or learning
Yeah.
from experiences and building upon that to try to avoid them again. I really think the more you sit down and think about it, it's not intuition, it's something else. But I
Yeah.
think if it's going to be something, it has to be just spur of the moment. A choice is it just happens,
Yeah.
and the consequences aren't thought about before the decision's made. It's only after, and I think that's how you have to sit down and look at it. Because I, I can't get into a discussion about what it is if a situation happens and you're like, oh wait, like are we thinking about this or are we not thinking about it? Because then immediately
Yeah.
there's thought. Like I
Mhm.
think that's a really difficult kind of slope. It's a slippery slope, as the
I think
article.
these things are very interchangeable. I think
Yeah,
that there's no like um who knows, like I might be proven wrong. Like there might be this like breakthrough experiment that says,
yeah,
but I think it's a very difficult thing to kind of wrap your head around. So
exactly.
we apologize if you're listening to some Monday morning and starts your week off with like a mental pretzel. There it is again.
Yeah, that's
With like
what are they? Old Dutch or Old Gold?
um
Really good on Austin. Jesus.
crickets. Well, what else? I mean, just kind of
you
cover what
know,
we wanted to.
yeah, we kind of went through it, and just obviously there's
Yeah.
again, I really think it's sometimes relative, but it's again, you can't sit
Yeah.
down and can't hammer out a definition. I think the definition above that we kind of talked about is very scientific
Yeah.
in its nature, and it has to be because we're talking about a neural process that for the longest time we associated with our digestive tract, and we still do. I don't understand where that comes from. There's probably
Trust
some
your
cool
gut.
history about it, but
Yeah.
it's definitely interesting. And the fact that there's scientific evidence coming out that it's a actual, like, not one of the five like senses, but it's a sensation that our body can, that you can quantify, that you can actually measure. that's pretty neat. But at the same time, you look at a real world example of using it in business or using it as, in an administrative role, and seeing that almost half the time a decision is made, it's intuitive, and how that impacts people, you can see those consequences every day. So it was just a little, kind of not a full kind of, culmination of the opportunity to discuss this. Like, we didn't really cover all of our bases, but I feel like we got, the most part of just how confusing this dang thing of intuition is, and trusting your gut. And I just, again, can't really think about too many times that my decisions were made based strictly off my gut. There's probably a lot, and I just can't.
Yeah.
I probably, because they're unconscious, I probably just don't think about them. Funny, but yeah, that's all I have for this week. I don't know if you have anything else.
No.
You want to make our listeners scratch their heads again? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a head scratcher. We have our ACS campaigns done and over with, or almost. Holy cats! Is this the last episode in June?
Yes, sir. I think so.
Our store is still available. It's still up.
Yeah.
Let us know if you want us to revamp some of the designs and stuff. But yeah.
As you can see, I'm rocking with the really nice tie-dye. It looks fine. Looks good. But
yeah.
That's all I got for you guys today.
Oh, we got some good stuff going up.
Yeah, we do.
Some fun stuff.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening and watching.
Yeah. Appreciate it. Bye.
Where's this stop?